Hey everybody, welcome to Move to Combat. I'm James, and here are your hosts, Haley.
Hey, what's up, you guys?
And Kenny.
Hey.
What are we talking about today, Haley?
Today, Kenny and I did some standard deck techs for you. So we're going to go through those and break them down and what we're doing with them.
Yeah. It was actually pretty cool because we were able to touch on the four main deck types, which is aggro, tempo, mid-range, and control.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because that's just typically the styles that Kenny and I play in. Like, I typically will play aggro or mid-range. I mean, I dive into tempo every now and then, but tempos and control are kind of Kenny's.
I really like playing reactively and messing with people's lives.
For the new players, why don't we break down what each one of those deck names means?
Yeah. You want to start?
Sure. Well,
okay.
we'll do it in
order. And keep in mind, everybody listening, if you have comments, feel free to make them. I'll read some of them on the air.
Yeah. So we're gonna start with an aggro deck. It is arguably the quickest. It's not arguably. It just is the quickest.
It is the quickest.
It's just the quickest. You're playing as many things as you can and you're swinging. That's what aggro is.
Yeah, basically drop their life total as fast as possible.
Yeah, you don't care about your life total. Your goal is just get the damage in there.
The solution to defense is more offense, basically.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Basically, aggro is short for aggression. If you ever play MMOs, the tank draws aggro, so they draw all the attacks. Aggro is just you hitting your opponent as hard and as fast as possible.
Yeah. And then I'll let Kenny explain tempo because he plays it more often than I do.
I really do. Tempo is... It refers to the time, or the clock, or how long you are expected to take before you win. So tempo decks kind of interact with that, either bouncing creatures, or speeding up their own tempo by playing lords, or pumping their own guys, or tapping opponents' creatures down, or just kind of denying them cards, making them discard things. It's this weird kind of mid-range approach where you're still playing like one card each turn, but you're doing it in a way that is interacting with your opponent.
I would say tempo is kind of like, yes, you're interacting with your opponent. You're playing one thing per turn that curves your list out.
That's a little bit more concise, yeah.
You're playing one thing per turn that's like working with the curve of your deck. So your turn 1 will play into your turn 2 play, will play into your turn 3 play, will play into your turn 4 play.
Yeah.
And when you're not necessarily dropping like a 1 drop, then a 2 drop, then a 3 drop, then a 4 drop. You're just doing them in a sequence that makes sense, and then that's still allowing you the interaction with your opponents.
That was way more concise than how I tried to put it. But basically,
and I don't play tempo that much.
Mid-range and aggro are fairly linear in the way that they work, in that it's... Let me explain.
How dare you insult me like that?
In that it's on a graph, it was a line. It would be a line, right? Tempo is more of a curve. So instead of it just ramping up slowly, it just spikes, and then your opponent dies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, then you go into mid-range, and mid-range is kind of like, my game starts at, like, turn 4 or 5, for real. So my first couple turns are probably spent ramping up to stuff, or playing stuff that just gets really big later. It gets big and stompy quickly, but it starts more at, like, turn 4 or 5. So I'll let you do your thing for the first couple of turns, and then my board state just... is deal with it or die.
Yeah, it's
more or less.
It's super proactive.
Yes.
It's kind of, I want to say it's one of the most honest ways to play Magic. Just mid-range.
Probably.
Just 1 drop on turn 1, 2 drop on turn 2, 3 drop on turn 3.
And I know what the least honest way to play is, and it's my favorite type.
Everyone's going to look at me now. So control is about controlling your opponent.
Yay!
Not yay. No yay.
Absolutely yay.
There was no yay in this situation.
It's less about trying to get their life total as low as possible, as fast as possible, and it's...
You're out of frame and it's bothering me.
Well, I gotta move my mic, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. I was trying to do it stealthily.
But control's more about surviving into the late game, where your cards are way more valuable than your opponent's. So you're playing counterspells, you're playing removal, and then you play this big, hard-to-remove threat, and that just, I don't know, gets you lots of advantage.
I love Haley's reaction.
Haley really doesn't like playing against control. It makes her life terrible.
There are some instances in which control is okay, but if I'm playing standard and I'm playing against control, standard is a format in which I'm supposed to get 3 games in a 50-minute time period. You know when I don't get 3 games in a 50-minute time period? When control is like, let me just dirtle and make sure you've got nothing left.
Notice the color shirt that I am wearing.
Blue is the best color, obviously. There's no argument there. I just hate playing against control because they just sit there and they dirtle and they're like, no, remove that. No, remove that. No. Are you out of answers yet? Are you out of answers yet? Good. We're only 30 minutes into the round and game 1 just finished.
Yeah.
We are
no offense to control players. You guys are great. I just hate playing against you when you're playing control.
If you like saying no, control's for you. I don't like that, the deck.
Yeah. So I think with those explanations out of the way, though, we should jump in
absolutely.
to our deck techs, starting with our aggro deck.
Yep.
I built a mono black zombie deck that's like the budget version of it, because standard can be an expensive format to play, so I thought it'd be nice to have something that was still very effective, yet cost effective as well. I think when I priced this deck out, it was around $60 or $70, depending on your card source. Where you get stuff from, so it's super affordable, pretty easy to get into if you're not looking to drop a lot, but it's still pretty effective. Starting with our creatures, we run a 4 of Death Baron in the main board. Death Baron is a 3-drop, double black, 1 generic, 2/2 zombie wizard. He says that skeletons you control and other zombies you control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. Death Touch is incredibly effective because it works as removal. And additionally, he's pumping all of my zombies, and there are only 4 creatures in the deck that are not zombies that we'll get to in a minute. But they are skeletons, so he still hits them. So he just effectively makes everything bigger and far more scary. So he is a 4 of because I definitely want to have him on the board. Additionally, he's not legendary, so I can have as many of them out as I want at a time. I can speak English. Next up, we have 4 of Diregraph Ghoul. He is a 1-drop 2/2 and he enters the battlefield tapped. So he's a turn 2/2 that effectively comes out on turn 1. So when he untaps, he's ready to swing in for 2 damage, which is pretty good. We run a 1 of Eternal Taskmaster in the main board. He is Recursion because he is a 2-drop 2/3, and when he enters the battlefield tapped, and whenever he attacks, you can pay 2 generic and 1 black mana. If you do, you get to return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. So he's constant recursion every time he attacks, and he extends the length of the game, meaning as long as your opponents aren't exiling your stuff, he's just doing more of what your deck wants to do, which is recur all of your little guys.
Yeah, he seems like he wants to just keep giving you gas.
Yeah, he just keeps giving you gas. He's a 2/3, so he's like not shockable. He is lightning strikeable, but there's not, a ton of stuff that just outright removes him. Like he evades the whole
he evades Cry of the Carnarium.
Yeah, he evades Cry of the Carnarium, which gives everything -2/2. So he's pretty decent to have in the main board, which I'm playing a bunch of little guys. Next up, we've got a 4 of Gutterbones. He's a 1-drop 2/1, and he enters the battlefield tapped. He is the 4 of creature that is not a zombie, and he's the only creature in the deck that is not a zombie. But once again, he is a skeleton, so Death Baron still gives us value with him. He's a 2/1, and he has an ability that says for 1 generic mana and 1 black mana, you can return from your graveyard to your hand. You can activate this ability only during your turn and only if your opponent lost life this turn. So he doesn't get hit by all the stuff that recurs zombies, but he can recur himself, which makes him really nice.
It turns out Death Touch creatures that keep coming back are kind of nuts.
Kind of scary. Yeah. That's what this deck does, is just plays a bunch of little dudes that keep recurring. Additionally, in creatures, we have a 1 of Josu Vess. He fits nicely in the flavor of the deck because he is Liliana's brother. He is also a Lich Knight, so he is a zombie as well. He is pretty much the top end of the deck at a 4 mana cost. He's 2 colorless and 2 black for a 4/5. He has a kicker of 6, which which means you can pay an additional 5 generic and 1 black mana to kick him. He is a 4/5 with Menace, and he says when he enters the battlefield, if he was kicked, you get to create 8 2/2 black zombie knight creature tokens with Menace. Now you just have a big field.
And Death Touch. And +1/+1.
Yeah, and +1/+1 and Death Touch, ideally. He's good as a top end, just because if you don't have the ability to kick him, he's a 4/5 with Menace, which means they need at least 2 creatures to block him. But if you can get that kicker off, that could potentially be game over right there, because that's a lot of creatures with Menace, or a lot of creatures to remove all at once.
I just want to say Josu Vess is a really spicy ad in here. It makes me really happy to see him in any deck, because he's a really efficient creature when you're not paying his kicker. Even
if you are paying his kicker, you're getting for 10 mana, you're getting 9 creatures. He's got insane value there.
20 power?
Yeah, something like that. I don't do math well. But yeah, you're getting a ton of power for 10 mana. He's a great top end. Additionally, the reason we have one of him in here is because he makes a decent replacement for Liliana, because this is a budget deck, and Liliana, last I checked, was a $10 to $12 card.
Oh, really?
So he's only like 50 cents to $1. So as opposed to adding that 4th Liliana in there, he can help make your field bigger, or is just a big threat on the board. We also have Lazatep Reaver, who is a 2-drop, a 1 generic, and 1 black for a 1/2. And when he enters the battlefield, you amass 1. So he's really good because he's a 2-drop for 2 power on 2 bodies.
And they're both zombies.
And they're both zombies. So you're getting the bonus of for the amount of mana that you're paying for him with 2, you're still getting the 2 power, which is kind of what you want at the 2-drop slot, is to have something with at least 2 power, but you're getting it on 2 separate bodies, which can make it harder to remove if your opponent is only playing single target removal. Next, a 3 of Midnight Reaper. He is a 3-drop, 2 generic, 1 black for a 3/2, and whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaver deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. So this is great because it's giving you constant card advantage. You can recur all of your little guys, so you don't really care too much if they die, so they're constantly dying, you get a card, you get the creature back. I don't know what's not to like about that.
It's being played all over standard for a reason. It's a really good card. Good.
Additionally, this deck doesn't have a ton of tokens in it, aside from Josu or the Amass tokens. Most of your creatures are the little 1-drop, 2-drop guys that you can constantly recur. So pretty much almost anything that dies gets this trigger, which is really nice. And then we've got a 4 of Plaguewright in the deck. He is a 2-drop, 2/1. He is 1 generic and 1 black, and he says whenever he becomes blocked, each creature blocking it gets -1/-1 until end of turn. So he obliterates 1/1 tokens. They don't even have a chance to deal damage back to him because they declared as the blocker and they instantly die. Yeah. Or, additionally, he can take on some of the higher, 3 toughness guys because he can deal 2 damage and it gets -1/-1. So if it's got 3 toughness, he's still taking him out. So it just makes him good value.
I just want to say that Plaguewright was kind of a limited bomb in the early game. It was kind of hilarious.
Yeah. When he was first came out in Limited, he was doing pretty good. He does some work in Limited.
Yeah.
Moving on to the spells category, we have a 3 of Cast Down, which is a 2-drop, 1 generic, and 1 black. Instant, destroy target non-legendary creature. And then we have a 3 of Obnixilus's Cruelty, which is a 2 generic, 1 black, instant. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. If that creature would die this turn, exile instead. So these are both really good instant speed black spell removals for low costs. They fit into the curve of the deck perfectly, and they're both good against Phoenix. More so Obnixilus's Cruelty because it exiles it instead, but also just destroying a non-legendary creature because this deck is weak to Phoenixes or things that fly a lot, so being able to get rid of it completely with Obnixilus's Cruelty, or at least tone it down a turn with Cast Down, because if I'm swinging a ton of guys at you all at once, I'm not too scared of your 1/1 Rebirth Phoenix token, if it's Rekindling Phoenix. I'm just not. You get a 0/1. I don't care. And then the last of the, what I would call the spell slots, Spark Harvest. It is a 1 black mana sorcery speed spell, As an additional cost to cast this spell, you either sacrifice a creature or you pay 3 generic and 1 black, and it destroys target creature or planeswalker. So it's walker removal, and I can either, like, late game, pay the extra mana into it and not care so much, or I can sacrifice a creature if I have one of my recursion engines out, because once again, death triggers, sack the little guy, get the stuff, do the thing, get the little guy back. I don't care so much about losing my guys. One more thing, like, in the spell slot, moving on to the next page, we have Kaya's Ghost Form as a 3-of. It is a 1 black mana enchantment. You enchant creature or planeswalker you control, and she says, when enchanted permanent dies or it's put into exile, you get to return that card to the battlefield under your control.
And it's worth noting that this targets planeswalkers, so
yes,
you can throw it on the next card Haley's going to go over, and then it comes back.
I have her on the same slide as Lily, because she's pretty much in this deck mainly for Lily, although she is really good with the Death Barons as well. But she's mostly for Lily, because if you put her on a Liliana, not only do they have to kill that Liliana twice, but when Lily comes back, she's got full loyalty. So you can recur your whole graveyard again. So now she's a threat because you have to get rid of Liliana twice. You have to get rid of the field that she builds twice. Like, Kaya's Ghost Form just make Lily that much more stupid.
Yeah.
That much more stupid. As far as Lily goes, she is a 4-drop planeswalker. She is 2 generic mana and 2 black mana. She comes out for 4 loyalty. Her +1 mills your stuff, so it's adding extra zombies into your graveyard for her final ability, or it just gives you extra creature power to recur if you've got, like, one of your Eternal Taskmasters out. Her -2 is removal. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of zombies you control. So you can potentially move something pretty big here. And then her -3 says you may cast zombie cards from your graveyard this turn. That's like, I just got my whole graveyard back. You're welcome.
If you have the mana, yeah.
Yeah, if you've got the mana. But our mana base helps cover that because we play Cabal Strongholds. Cabal Stronghold is a 3-of. It can either tap to add a generic, a colorless mana, sorry. Can tap to add a colorless mana, or you can pay 3 generic and tap it to add a black mana for each basic swamp you control. So when you run into, like, the later game and you have, like, 4, 5, 6 swamps out there, because the rest of the deck, the rest of the land base has swamps. It's just swamps. It's a mono black deck. You don't need anything super fancy, so it runs 18 swamps. You have 7 or 8 of those out there and you've got a Cabal Stronghold, you just gave yourself so much more mana. So, say I've got 5 swamps out there, I tap 3 of them and tap this, I just added 5 additional mana to my pool and I still have the 2 extra, so that's 7 mana that I have now. So it's constant, just builds up your mana pool, so you can do stuff with it like get the stuff back from the graveyard with Lily, or additionally, if you don't have a Lily on the board, but you do have a Josu in hand, that can help you get the kicker off pretty nicely. So, pretty basic land base. It's only 2 different lands, but very effective nonetheless. Regarding the sideboard, we are weak to some stuff, so, you gotta have the pieces in the end. So, we do have 2 of Argyll's Bloodfast. It is a 2-drop enchantment, 1 generic mana, 1 black. It's a legendary enchantment. You can pay 1 generic and 1 black to pay 2 life and draw a card. Or at the beginning of your upkeep, if you've got 5 or less life, you may transform it into another land. It comes in mostly against control in, like, slower mid-range decks, just because it can give you extra card advantage. And then additionally, if you do get to a point where you want to flip it, it will give you life, because you can sack a creature to gain life. You don't care about sacking your creatures because they all recur, and that's the point of the deck. It's great. It's got a 1 of Dreadhorde Evasion in the sideboard as well, so it's a 1 generic, 1 black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and amass 1, so you're either creating a black zombie army token, or you're putting an additional +1/+1 counter on one that you already have. And it says whenever a zombie token you control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until end of turn. This is mostly for control, but potentially mid-range depending on what they're playing. It's just a constant extra threat that they're going to have to keep track of each turn, whether it's creating another creature for them to remove or creating a bigger threat that they're going to have to remove. Next up, we have a 2 of Drill Bit. It is a 3-drop, 2 generic mana, 1 black sorcery spell with a spectacle cost of 1 black. Spectacle, for those of you who don't know, says you may cast the spell for its spectacle cost rather than paying its mana cost if an opponent lost life this turn, and it says target player reveals their hand, and you choose a non-land card from it, and that player discards that card. That comes in against control, and we have that along with a 4 of Duress in the sideboard, which is a 1 black mana sorcery that says target opponent reveals their hand, and you can choose a non-creature, non-land card from it, and have them discard that card. That also comes in against control. The reason I run 4 of Duress as opposed instead of more Drill Bits is because Duress is guaranteed 1 mana, whereas Drill Bit is only potentially 1 mana.
Yeah, so, you have to get in with it.
Yes, you have to get in with it. So you're able to hit less with it. But if you're bringing it in against control typically doesn't play a lot of creatures anyways, and you have other stuff that can deal with their creatures, like the Obnixilus's Cruelty and such.
I wouldn't play Drill Bit simply because it has a pun on the card. Never boring.
I never noticed that. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Kaylee's done with us.
We're just gonna finish up the sideboard, and I'm gonna pretend like that never happened.
At least it's never boring.
Moving on to the next 4 cards of the sideboard. We run 2 more Eternal Taskmasters in the sideboard. You know what he does, we explained it earlier. He's really good against mid-range and control, because once again, for decks that, are either exiling or they're getting rid of the lilies, or they're trying to get rid of the other creatures, he continues to extend the game because you can keep recurring your creatures even if you are missing a key piece like Liliana. A 1 of Graveyard Marshal, he's a 2-drop, double black, 3/2. He is 2 generic, and he has an ability that is 2 generic and 1 black mana that says you can exile a creature card from your graveyard and create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. He is kind of good against, or he's pretty good against aggro, because Lily would be too slow for aggro, or has potentially too slow for aggro, because aggro's just dropping a bunch of other dudes that's swinging at you, which is what you're trying to do. So you want to take out your bigger pieces and get out the smaller stuff. So when you take out some of your recursion, obviously this is a way for you to get more pieces on the board that can help with that. We play a 2 of Moment of Craving. It is a 1-drop, or it's a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 black. Instant, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and you gain 2 life. This is really, really good against aggro, because not only are you destroying one of their creatures, but you're gaining life, which is the bane of existence of aggro, because they don't want you to gain life because they're trying to kill you as fast as possible.
Specifically mono red.
Yeah, specifically mono red. But the longer you can make the game last, the better chance you have of winning against aggro, so this is just really good. And then 1 of the Elder Spell, it is a 2-drop, 2 black.
This is 4 of
or 4.
It's a 1 of. Why did I put... Oops, my bad. It's a 1 of.
It's a
Whoopsie.
big 1 of for large values of
It's
1.
it's a big 1 of, and that was a editing error on my part. I'm gonna go ahead and blame Kenny for that one, even though it's not his fault. Yeah, Kenny, how dare you put it's a 4 of?
It's always my
Elder
fault.
Spell is a 1 of in the sideboard. It destroys any number of target planeswalkers. You get to choose a planeswalker you control and put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker destroyed this way. This is obviously just really good if you're playing a deck with heavy planeswalkers, because then you're killing their planeswalkers and you're making your Liliana bigger, which means she probably lives longer. So that is a 1 of in the sideboard, and that kind of rounds out the mono black zombies deck.
That's an exciting deck. I think it's a pretty cool deck because I like low cost creature decks. But as you guys know,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
like super hyper efficient decks, and it's got a lot of recursion, so it's a pretty cool deck.
Zombies is a really cool tribe. It functions in this way that it's low to the ground and fast, like you would expect most aggro decks to be, but then it has this ability to extend into the mid game and late game by just replaying the things that you've already played. And that's a really cool facet for a deck to have, specifically an aggro deck.
if you're not exiling my stuff, you're gonna regret it later.
Yeah.
And that's mainly what this deck does, and that's why I like playing it. I think it's really fun because it extends the aggro portion of the deck. So I'm playing a lot of dudes, but I'm not careless with them, but I can be a little bit more careless with them and just continuously apply pressure because I can bring them all back later. So it's really fun.
Yeah. I played zombies for a hot minute during Amonkhet, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's interesting to mention as well, when I was playtesting this deck on MTG Arena, it moved me up like 2 or 3 tiers.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was pretty efficient. It's definitely, when you go into higher level tier stuff against like super tier 1 lists that have dumped a lot of money into their deck, it doesn't always perform as well as it is a budget deck, but it should be noted that if you go into an FNM with this, you're probably going to kick butt.
Oh, you're going to do just fine.
Yeah, you're going to do just fine. This deck is really super fun to play. It's pretty competitive, all things considered.
Yeah.
And like I said, last I priced it out, it only cost about $60 or $70 to build. So.
Which is really cheap for
it's pretty low to the ground.
It makes
for
it
a standard deck.
Makes it a really good entry point for new players, especially it being an aggro deck, which is usually the the easiest to grasp.
The easiest selling point to newer players.
Swing and fling.
Yes.
You
just turn your guy sideways.
Yes. It's a lot less overwhelming to newer players to be able to play aggro decks as well. So it's just a fun, good build.
Yeah.
I like it.
This is cool.
What do we got next?
So we are going to be talking about the deck that I'm apparently known for. Simic Merfolk.
Why am I not surprised?
I've been on and off Merfolk since Ixalan Block, which is, a year and a half now?
Yeah, almost 2 years now.
I'm convinced you're actually a fish.
Pretty much any format you can play
breathe on the
Merfolk.
side of your neck with gills, like...
I do have a
sideways.
Simic Merfolk deck in Commander as well.
Pretty much any format Kenny could play Merfolk in, he's probably going to play Merfolk in.
Secret, it's probably my favorite tribe. And green-blue is one of my favorite color combinations because it offers this ability to play creatures with really unique abilities and interaction from blue. So we're going to start by talking about, since this is a tribal deck, we're going to talk about our lords, of which I consider there are 16, which is a lot in standard, like a lot. Our first is the most traditional. It's Merfolk Mistbinder. It's a blue and a green for a 2/2 that says other Merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1. It just comes down and pumps all your dudes. Kamena is kind of the top end of the deck. He's a 3-drop, 1 green and blue for a 2/4, and he's got a lot of text. Basically, he turns your Merfolk into other things. So you can tap 1 Merfolk to give Kamena unblockability. So you just get in with your Kamena.
Unblockability.
Yeah.
I like that word.
He can't be blocked.
Unblockability.
You can tap 3 Merfolk to draw a card, and then you can tap 5 Merfolk you control to put a +1/+1 counter on each Merfolk you control. So the most important one is obviously the draw a card one, and the best thing about Kamena is that he doesn't care about whether the creatures have haste or not, because it's a part of paying the cost. So you can just slam a bunch of Merfolk down, and then your opponent has to react to your board, and you're like, cool, I'll just draw like 2 cards in response. Deeproot Elite is the hardest lord to play, but it's the most rewarding, in my opinion. It's 1 and a green for a 1/1, so it dies to everything. But whenever another Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, Deeproot Elite puts a +1/+1 counter on a target Merfolk you control. So as you're playing a bunch of dudes, Deeproot Elite keeps triggering, and it just keeps growing your dudes. And even if they remove the Deeproot Elite, your guys are still huge. The next lord isn't even a creature, but I still consider it a lord because it cares a lot about you playing Merfolk, and that's Deeproot Waters. It's 2 and a blue for an enchantment, and whenever you cast a Merfolk spell, you get a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token with hexproof. And the hexproof's super important because then you can just store all your +1/+1 counters on those hexproof guys.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd necessarily call this a lord, because a lord is traditionally something that buffs everything else up. But this is definitely an engine that this deck loves, because you're playing nothing but Merfolk. So then you're just making more Merfolk with the Merfolk that trigger every other lord in the deck.
Yeah.
Isn't it you that always says, just keep swimming, just keep swimming?
Yeah. So, FYI, this deck plays about 32 creatures, all of which are Merfolk. There are lots of 4-ofs. I think all of the deck is 4-ofs, actually.
Yeah,
So it's pretty straightforward. Next, we're going to talk about our other creatures, which give us value for doing other stuff. Mostly +1/+1 counters. The first is Jade Bear. One of our 8/1 drops. It's a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on another target merfolk you control. It just comes in and it pumps a guy. Benthic Biomancer is probably the best 1-drop in the deck of the 2 1-drops we're playing.
There's only 2 1-drops, but this one's the better one of the 2.
Of course. So it's a 1-mana, 1/1 Merfolk Wizard mutant, and the wizard will come into play when we talk about the sideboard. It's got a blue and a 1 for Adapt 1, which puts a +1/+1 counter on it if it doesn't have a counter on it already. But the most important part is whenever it gets a +1/+1 counter, you draw a card and then discard a card. So pumping it lets you loot, which turns your bad cards into better cards.
Yes.
Our next one is Silvergill Adept. It's a 2-mana, 2/1 Merfolk Wizard. This is actually played in Modern for obvious reasons. It's a cantrip, so aggro decks and tempo decks tend to run out of gas because they play all their cards really, really fast.
So they need card draw.
This
is Merfolk's card draw.
Yeah, one of them. So it's not always... if you don't have a Merfolk on hand, it is a 5-drop. You have to pay 3 in addition to its 2-mana CMC. But if you have a Merfolk in hand, it's 2 mana, and then you get to play a dude and draw a card. Merfolk Skydiver, on the other hand, is kind of copies 5 through 8 of Jade Bear. I want to say just a lot better. It's just a lot better. It's green and a blue for 1/1 Merfolk mutant with flying. And when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It doesn't have to be a Merfolk, and it doesn't have to be another creature, so you can pump the Skydiver as well. But the coolest part is that you can pay 5 mana, 3 a green and a blue, to proliferate, which means for each counter on each permanent in play, you can put an additional counter on that permanent of that type. So
now the Merfolk that you put all those counters on are just getting bigger.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And you can do this if, say, you don't have anything to do with your mana, you just pay 5 mana and proliferate your dudes. It's really cool.
Out of cards, proliferate.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And
gross.
It's great.
It's gross.
So next we're going to be talking about our interaction, of which it's kind of minimal, but it's still really good. Our first one is Merfolk Trickster, which happens to be a Merfolk. I'm still convinced this is a kill spell and not actually a creature, given how many creatures it's killed. But it's double blue for a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard with Flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you tap target creature an opponent controls, and it loses all abilities until end of turn. So this is our biggest answer to Rekindling Phoenix, to the God Eternals, to Nicobolus, to any Phoenix, anything that has any abilities that we care about. Incubation and Congruity is kind of 2 cards wrapped up into one. That's exactly what it is. But the first half...
That's exactly what it is, Kenny.
But
It's
the
2
first-
cards
what
in
a combo
one.
card is.
The first half, Incubation, is just 1 mana for a sorcery, and then you look at the top 5 cards of your library, you may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand, and then you put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So it just digs you through your deck for creatures, which is probably the more important half of the card. The next card is Incongruity, which is 1, a blue and a green for an instant that exiles target creature, and that creature's controller creates a 3/3 frog lizard creature token. So any of those phoenixes or any of those troublesome creatures that you don't want to deal with, you just turn it into a 3/3. It's like, here, have a frog.
Just reminded me like of the old Scooby-Doo where like, those troublesome creatures or those meddling kids.
Just like, I don't like that creature, go away. But it's more for the incubation for when you run out of cards. After that, we're going to tackle the lands. And it's basically just covering our color needs. We're running
Full art lands only, of course.
they're pretty.
The full art lands are the prettiest.
They're pretty and I like them.
The only reason I didn't use them in the zombie deck to show that we needed swamps was because they wouldn't have fallen into the budget category anymore.
Without the full art duels, this deck's actually fairly affordable. But we're running our 8 duels. Hinterland Harbor and Breeding Pool are both blue-green lands that tap for blue and a green, or blue or a green. Unclaimed Territory is a card that says it enters the battlefield and you choose a creature type, and then it can add a colorless mana to your mana pool, or You can add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool and spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type.
And I'm going to pick, what am I going to pick?
Merfolk, of course.
Oh, of course.
Are you sure you don't want to pick mutants? There were a couple mutants in there.
There were a couple mutants. There's also shamans and warriors and a whole bunch of other cool stuff.
I would pick the mutants.
I'm going to pick Merfolk, though. But it allows us to kind of get away with running double blue spells and still being able to play them on curve, which is nice. And then we're swinging a little bit more towards blue because of the sideboard, but we're running 6 islands and 2 forests, and just untapped lands matter because we're trying to go fast.
Gotta go quick.
Sonic the Hedgehog, what?
We go wider and taller faster
What
than
is
we're
blue?
Horrible movie, what?
We're not gonna talk about that.
But the coolest part of the deck, in my opinion, is the sideboard. So we draw lots of cards, which makes Vivian Reed actually playable in a 20-land deck.
What do you mean it actually makes her playable? Vivian Reed is plenty playable.
Not in a 20-land deck. Normally.
Have you seen how I draw lands? Not a problem.
But at this deck tends to kind of flood a little bit because you draw so many cards. So Vivian Reed gives us a way to deal with enchantments, flyers, and then just, if you get to 8, make your dudes +2/+2, vigilant, trample, and indestructible. She also digs you to your creatures. She can kind of give you a mini incubation. You just put the rest on the bottom. And then our next one...
So what deck would you put...
Vivian?
Would you substitute Vivian for?
Probably mid-range.
Mid-range deck?
Yep. It just does a good job of getting rid of the enchantments and artifacts that cause problems. You can dig for more guys if they have sweepers. But it just... And it becomes a threat, so they have to get rid of it. And then they have to slog through a wave of fish to get there, which is a lot of fun.
And smelly.
Yeah, a little bit. It makes swinging in really hard.
And then we got my favorite bastard of all time.
Yeah, our next one is strictly for our control matchups, because if we can push control 1 turn behind us, 1 turn further behind us, then we're going to steal the game.
It's the captain of the fun police himself.
Dovin Hand of Control is 2 mana and then a hybrid white-blue, so we can just use blue to play it. And he comes with 5 loyalty. And his passive says, artifacts, instants, and sorcery spells your opponent's cast cost 1 more to cast. So he pushes the counter spells and the sweepers and the removal spells back 1 mana. I really like making people pay 4 mana for Bedevils and Mortifies. It's really nice.
Feels bad.
Not for me.
Feels bad.
But then he has a -1, and until your next turn, you prevent all damage that would be dealt to and dealt by target permanent and opponent controls. So you can shut down a big blocker and just swing in with Abandon. Our next one, since we're running 12 wizards, we are running a full playset of Wizard's Retort in the sideboard. And this is also for control and kind of burn, because we can get to the 2 mana fairly easily. It's just a counter-target spell. It's double blue and 1 for a counter spell, and then if you have a wizard in play, it just costs 2 blue, so it's just a counter spell, which is really nice and hard to play around.
Which they said they'd never reprint in Standard, so they printed it in Standard with conditions.
Yeah! Turns out a lot of good merfolk are wizards as well.
Yeah.
Our next one is Lazotep Plating. So this is mostly for decks that rely on spot removal, like Grixis. It gives you and permanents you control hexproof until end of turn, and then it creates a 1/1 amass token. So it's more to protect the important creatures on your board, like your Kamena and your Merfolk Mistbinder and stuff that give you X amount of power or X amount of cards each turn, and keep them in play for another turn. Just nerf a spell. We do have a couple more cards to talk about in the board, and the most important one is Sleep. So for decks that want to gum up the board, we bring in Sleep. Mid-range, aggro, whatever. It's 4 mana, 2 blue and 2. It's sorcery, and you tap all creatures target player controls. Those creatures don't untap during that next player's untap step. So with this deck, you generally have 10 plus creatures in the board, and they all usually have at least 1 counter on them.
So that's just game ender.
So it usually just ends the game.
Yeah, that's just this. I have lethal.
You're dead.
nullify your board.
Yeah. Just tap your stuff, swing. It swings the game in such a way that if they don't know it's there, they just kind of lose to it. Spell Pierce is just another counterspell we're running against faster decks that want to run low to the ground removal spells. It just counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2.
Yeah.
Just tell them no.
Just a good no. Or at least, at the very least, tax their mana.
Yeah, especially when you want to be running under an opponent. You don't want to clog your main board up with a bunch of Wizard's Retorts.
Right.
So I really like this deck because I like decks that have themes in them. And tribals, really, my
Tribal's
favorite
a lot of fun,
theme.
yeah.
Yeah. But I also hate this deck because I played against variations of this deck.
Yeah.
It steals games. It's pretty fun.
Kenny's been on this boat for the last 2 years, and I'm just ready for it to die.
Well, Kenny's been tuning this build for the last 2 years.
And I'm just ready for it to die.
He knows his fish. He's almost a sushi chef now.
I guess. But on the plus side, this deck is fairly affordable. A lot of the merfolk are actually pretty cheap.
Definitely.
It clocks in at about 175. Just because of the lands in Vivian. If you didn't have those in the deck, then it would be much cheaper. But you do need the color fixing. So, yeah, this deck's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I play it at FNM myself. It's a blast.
Every week.
Not every week. Sometimes I get bored and play Super Friends instead.
That's fair. Alright, so.
We're no longer going budget.
Team or mid-range? This
Oh boy.
gets out of the budget just a little bit.
Just a lot.
Predominantly because it's got a 3-color mana base, and whenever you're dealing with efficient 2 to 3 color to 4 color mana bases, it gets kind of expensive. And also, all of the shock lands are going back up in price again.
Yay!
So, sorry about that. But this deck is still pretty fun to play. So, going into the creatures, we have a 3 of Direfleet Daredevil. He is a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 red for a 2/1 first striking guy. And when he enters the battlefield, you get to exile target instant or sorcery spell card from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast that card this turn, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast the spell, and if it would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So this just gets rid of a nasty spell that you can use. It's pretty nice.
Just steal in a removal spell, play it.
Worst case scenario, it just exiles the spell.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good. First strike makes it better because he can deal 2 damage, so that kills a lot of little guys in the format. Next up, we have a 3 of Goblin Chain Whirler. He is triple red for a 3/3 first strike, and when he enters the battlefield, he deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. Each creature and planeswalker they control. So he's really good because once again, he's a 3/3 first striker. So that's hitting a lot of things, and then he's dealing damage when he comes in. So it's really good against tokens, or things that play a lot of things with 1 toughness. For example, zombies, or
Or merfolk, yeah.
or potentially merfolk. Or at the very least, it makes them more hesitant to block if I've got a bunch of stuff on the board that I'm swinging with and their stuff has already taken 1 damage. Next up, we have a 4 of Growth Chamber Guardians. He is a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 green for a 2/2, and he has an ability for 2 generic and 1 green called Adapt 2. So whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Growth Chamber Guardian, you can search your library for a card named Growth Chamber Guardian, reveal it, and put it to your hand, then shuffle your library. So he's really good because he's a 2-drop, 2/2 body, which is very nice. And then he comes out and he can get bigger on the next turn, and he replaces himself in your hand when you do adapt him.
Yeah, you get
so
some
you
more
make him
bodies.
better, and then you get another creature to your hand, which is really nice. And then we have a 3 of Groll Spellbreaker. This card is a 3-drop, 1 generic mana, 1 red, and 1 green for a 3/3 creature. He has Riot, which says when he enters the battlefield, you get to choose a +1/+1 counter, or give him haste. And then he also has Trample, and as long as it's your turn, you and Groll Spellbreaker have Hexproof. So he's really good because he's either a 3-drop 4/4, or he's a 3-drop 3/3 with haste. And then obviously
And
he's got
Trample,
Trample. And then hexproof is always really nice, because that means on your turn you can't be like, settle the wreckage.
Or you just can't interact with the Gruul Spellbreaker at all on your turn.
Yeah, or they just can't interact with the Gruul Spellbreaker, which is nice because that means they have to use that instant speed, like, removal spell on their turn, which using an instant on your turn just kind of feels a little bit bad.
Just a little.
Then moving on to the rest of the creature base, we run a 4 of Hydroid Krasis, and this is where another little bit of the price in this deck comes in. He is a 1 green, 1 blue, and X creature. He is a 0/0 initially, but when you cast a spell, you gain half of X life and draw X cards, where you round down each time. He has flying and trample, and he enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on him. This is the only blue card in the main deck, and that should be noted, but additionally, he's just value. He gets you cards, he gains you life, and he's a flying trampler, which is just nuts, and he's as big or as little as you want to make him, which is really nice. We play a 4 of Llanowar Elf for kind of obvious reasons. He's ramp, so it's like turn 1, you play him so that on turn 2 you can have 3 mana. And then I'm getting my stuff down that much quicker, which is really nice. And then it plays a 1 of Phoenix in the main board. Rekindling Phoenix, I should specify. And Rekindling Phoenix is a 4-drop. It's 2 generic and 2 red for a 4/3 flyer that when he dies, you get to create a 0/1 red elemental creature token that says, the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice that creature and returned the card named Rekindling Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it gains haste until end of turn. Phoenix is just incredibly good because it recurs itself. You have to exile it or you keep seeing it again and again. It's a constant threat that has to be dealt with. And it alleviates some of the pressure off of your other cards because a lot of people do not want to see Phoenix, like, ever.
Yeah.
So it's really good to help alleviate the pressure. And, yeah, he's pretty decent top end of the deck as well, as Hydroid Krasis is. So, moving into some of the spells, the deck doesn't run a ton of traditional spells. It just has a mini red burn package, I would say. So it's got a 3 of Shock, which is a 1 red, deal 2 damage to any target, and a 3 of Lightning Strike, which is a 1 generic, 1 red instant that deals 3 damage to any target. So, I mean, it's just your standard burn package. It can hit the little guys. It gets the little guys out of my way so I can drop my big guys as fast as I can and swing in with them for as much damage as possible. It is a mid-range deck, so I typically, like I said, my big guys come out and start swinging more towards, like, turn 4 and 5, typically. So it just keeps your little stuff off the board early game, too, so I'm not taking damage before I get my big stuff on the board. Then, this deck also runs a mini Planeswalker package, which is probably my favorite part of the deck.
That's not a mini package, that's like 9 cards.
Kenny, do you know how many Planeswalkers I would play if I could? This is mini. So we run a 3 of Chandra, Fire Artisan, she is the 4-drop. She's 2 generic, 2 red for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. Her +1 exiles the top card of your library, and you can play it this turn. Her -7 exiles the top 7 cards of your library, and you may play them this turn. Additionally, she has a static ability that says whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are removed from Chandra Fire Artisan, she deals that much damage to target opponent or Planeswalker. So predominantly, she's in here for that card advantage that she gets you, and she does get you a lot of card advantage, trust me on that one. But additionally, she does deal that damage there too. So, like, if you can get that -7 off and get the top 7 cards in a turn where you just have a lot of mana, but then that also deals 7 damage to something. So that's a potential game ender there. So she does some work. You could say that. We also run a 3 of Domri, Anarch of Bolas. Little Domri. The better Domri in Standard.
Way better.
Way better.
So much better.
He is a 3-drop. He is 1 generic, 1 red, and 1 green for a 3 loyalty. His static ability buffs all your creatures and gives them +1/+0, which just, he's an onboard lord as a Planeswalker. His +1 adds either a green or red to your mana pool, and creature spells you cast can't be countered this turn, so he makes all of my creatures uncounterable, which is really good against control. Additionally, he gives me that extra mana to be able to play them. And then his -2 says target creature I control fights target creature I don't control, which is really nice because it acts as a form of removal in a deck where I didn't have a lot of spell slots. So it gives me that additional bit of get rid of your stuff off the board because I don't like it. We run a 1 of Vivian, Champion of the Wilds. She is a 3-drop, 2 generic, 1 green for a 4 loyalty. You can cast creatures as though they had flash, which is really nice, because now I can play my stuff on your turn as well. Her +1 says until your next turn, up to one target creature gains vigilance and reach, which is good because I don't have that many flyers in my deck, so it just helps be able to,
Stop them.
Except it just helps stop the flyers. And then vigilance is always nice because that means I've got blockers open after I swing. And then her -2 says I can look at the top 3 cards of my library, exile one face down, and put the rest on the bottom of my library in any order for as long as it remains exiled. You may look at that card and you may cast it if it's a creature card. So that's nice because she digs for a creature and then it gives me something that I can play at a later time. So it's kind of still card advantage.
It's absolutely card advantage.
It's absolutely card advantage, which is really good. And then we run 2 of Sarkhan the Masterless. He is a 5-drop, 3 generic, 2 red for 5 loyalty. He says whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, each damage you control deals 1 damage to that creature. A lot of people forget about this passive ability, so it's really nice because...
Low-key, it's really good. It's super spiky.
Because he has a -3 that creates a 4/4 dragon. So if you are able to get those dragons on the board, and they start, say you've got 2 of them, and people have an army of 2/2 tokens that they just start swinging at you. Oops, you just lost your tokens.
Yeah.
Bet you forgot that one, didn't you? So he's kind of sneaky if your opponent's not paying attention too much. And then additionally, his +1 ability, which is primarily why he's in here, is it says until end of turn each planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature token and gains flying. This is incredibly useful because I can have up to 4 planeswalkers on the board at a time, and if I make them all 4/4 red dragon creatures and can swing with all of them, that's 16 damage in the air.
Yep.
Good luck. Deal with that or die.
It's actually 20.
4 times 4 is 16.
It's 5 times 4.
I can have up to 4 on the board.
Yep, but Domri's ability gives them all
+1 +0. You're right. So I totally missed Domri's ability. If you've got all 4 of them and you've got Domri, yes, that is 20 damage. I can do math and pay attention. I can't do math. Onto the sideboard. So, I forgot lands. Lands are a thing.
Lots of colors.
It's a pretty standard land base for the most part. You have your 4 of Rootbound Crags and your 4 of Stomping Grounds, which are your red-green lands, your red-green buddies, and your red-green shocks. And then additionally, I've got 4 of Sulphur Falls and 4 of Steam Vents, which are the blue-red lands. I only run the 8 of these, just period, that produce blue, because like I said, Hydroid Krasis is the only blue card in the main board, and then there's only a couple of blue cards on the sideboard as well, so blue is more of a splash color, so 8 pretty much covers that I'll have blue whenever I need blue. And then the rest of the land base is also pretty straightforward. It's just a 4 of Breeding Pool, which is the green-blue shockland. I lied. I've got more blue sources in here. I should really, really do my math better. So it's 12 blue sources. And then I run a 2 of Forest and a 1 of Mountain because green is more predominantly the color that I need. And additionally, with the Rootbound Crags, that helps, although the Mountain helps too. If I need a forest, I need a forest, man. And then the sideboard. Now, speaking to the sideboard, 3 of Cindervines.
Cindervines is a cool card.
Cindervines is a cool card. It is 1 red, 1 green enchantment. It says whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, Cindervines deals 1 damage to that player. You can pay 1 generic, sacrifice Cindervines, and destroy target artifact or enchantment, and Cindervines deals 2 damage to that player's controller. This is really good against control, and or any deck that plays a lot of spells. For example, is it Drake's?
Yeah.
So
or just Nexus.
Or Nexus. Anything that's casting a lot of spells, this is really good against. A 3 of Kroll Harpooner. It is a 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 green for a 3/2 with reach. Undergrowth says when Kroll Harpooner enters the battlefield, you get to choose up to 1 target creature with flying that you don't control. Kroll Harpooner gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and then you may have Kroll Harpooner fight that creature. Once again, this deck, if I don't have like a Sarkhan out, is kind of weak to flyers, so this just gives me advantage against the flyers.
This card's actually a great reactive piece. If you're having trouble with flyers, I was playing it in Merfolk as like a 4 of out of the board for a while until we got Skydiver.
Correct. It's really good.
It is really good.
It's really good. It just helps you with flyers substantially.
I think it kills all the important ones, or at least trades with it.
As long as you have creatures in your board. Oh, no, it does, because it's 3 toughness, so it would hit Rekindling... 3 power. So it would hit Rekindling Phoenix just straight up. So even if you didn't have creatures in your board, this hits a lot of the predominant ones.
Yeah.
The only one it doesn't hit predominantly is Bolus. So as long as you've got one creature in your graveyard, you're pretty good. And then a 3 of Lava Coil. That is 1 color, or 1 generic, 1 red for the sorcery speed. Lava Coil deals 4 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So once again, it's really good against Phoenixes, it's really good against Boluses, because it's dealing that 4 damage and exiling them. So you don't ever have to worry about them again. Then you've got the 4 of Negate. That's supposed to be a 4 of Negate.
Oh, it's supposed to be 4 of...
I really should have double-checked this first.
Counterspell.
My bad. I'm totally good at this. So, it should be a 4 of Negate is just 2-drop, 1 generic, 1 blue, instant, counter-target, non-creature spell. I see what I did. I didn't change the numbers when I changed the colors. That was stupid on my part. I look really stupid now, and that's great. But Negate, yeah, it just counter-target non-creature spell.
Don't worry, it'll just be on the internet forever.
It'll just be on the internet forever. I know. Always, I'm an English major, and I should know this more than anybody. Always double-check your spelling and grammar before you post something. In this case, double-check your numbers. Just do it. You'll thank me later.
Well, to be fair, sideboards tend to be pretty fluid, so...
So sure, we'll just say everything's a 3 of. Yeah.
There you go.
Pick and choose what you like. Just pick and choose. It's all good.
Yeah.
So, negates for control or mid-range, depending on what they're playing. It's just really good. It just says no. Rekindling Phoenix, there's an additional 1 of them in the sideboard. It comes in against mid-range and aggro, because typically when you're playing aggro, most of the walkers tend to be a little bit slower. So, for the most part, I pull up my walker package and put in the creature package in the sideboard against aggro. So, he's just really good. He's another big threat. And then, a 1 of Ugin the Ineffable. He is a 6-drop for 4 mana. He says colorless spells cost you 2 less to cast. His +1 exiles the top card of your library face down, and you get to look at it, and then you create a 2/2 colorless spirit creature token. When that token leaves the battlefield, you put that exiled card into your hand, and his -3 destroys target permanent that's 1 or more colors. He's really good in mid-range. He's really good against mid-range, yeah. And
he's seeing it, because Ugin is colorless, he's actually kind of seeing play in all of the mid-range control sideboards.
Yeah, because he can kind of fit in anywhere. He's card advantage. And that card advantage, that card advantage gives you bodies. So as soon as that body dies, you get the card, but it also is giving you that body on the board, and he's removal. Mm-hmm. Man, I really wish I checked my numbers so I didn't look so stupid right now.
That's okay. We'll just say that there's 3 of each.
There's only 1 for incredibly large values of 1.
There you go.
Sure. Yeah. No, but sideboards are pretty fluid to begin with, so exact numbers are more up to you and however you want to play them.
And the decks that you're seeing at your local game store.
And the decks that you're seeing at your local game store. If you're only playing at local game stores, your sideboard's probably going to reflect more of the decks that you see on a week-to-week basis there. So, have fun with your sideboards. Just use these as suggestions.
There's lots of cool combos in this deck. Its downside is definitely its price tag. But if you
already had most of the cards laying around to begin with,
this is a great deck.
Yeah. If you're an average standard player and you already had all the land bases for it, this deck becomes pretty cheaper.
Card for card, this deck has a lot of individual power.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
And it's kind of just teamer mid-range good stuff.
Yeah.
It's some of the best of what's out there in these colors. It like I said, it predominantly plays blue for the Hydroid Crisis, but I really like Hydroid Crisis because he's a value engine, so blue it was.
Okay.
And what do we have for our
next
deck?
Is Blue-White Mill.
Ooh.
So, I like control sometimes, but I'm not patient enough to sit there and grind out a game without doing anything to my opponent. I prefer decks like Counterburn and Mill that are controlling the board while doing something else. So, that way the game tends to not go, a single game tends to not go 30 minutes.
I like where this is going.
I don't.
So, it is Mill, and we're effectively tripling our opponent's life total. but it's a lot of fun. So we're going to start with our engines. We're going to be playing a 4 of Drowned Secrets, which is a 2-mana enchantment that says whenever you cast a blue spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So all of the cards we're using to control our opponent are now milling them for 2. And the fact that most of our stuff costs about 3 mana or more tends to let Drowned Secrets slide underneath everything else we're playing. So we can lead with Drowned Secrets and then play everything else after that. We are playing a 2 of Psychic Corrosion, which is a 3-mana enchantment for 2 generic and a blue, that whenever you draw a card, each opponent puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. This card is... We're not turbo drawing, so this card is less good for us, but we are running 2 because it's still kind of a clock. And then with War of the Spark, Mill got Ashiok Dreamrender, which is 1 hybrid blue-black for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. It says spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controller to search their library. So your Field of Ruins, your anything that's going to search your library like that, your land finds, they don't happen. And then has a -1 that says target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard and then exile each opponent's graveyard. So this is a great main deck option against your zombies deck or against any deck that relies on their graveyard, as well as just letting us put 4 cards into their yard and then getting rid of them forever.
The pain.
It doesn't hurt that if you follow Drowned Secrets with Ashiok, you're getting 6 cards off the top.
Yes.
Next, we're going to be talking about our card draw because we're in blue-white.
Look at that masterpiece, Hero of Dominaria.
Oh yeah, it's pretty. I like it.
You bougie.
We are in blue-white, and we do need to keep our hand filled up in order to react to our opponent. So we're going to be running 3 Chemist's Insight, which is 4 mana for an instant that lets us draw 2 cards, and then Jumpstarts. So we can discard a card in our hand to play Chemist's Insight out of the graveyard and then exile it. Then Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is, in my opinion, the best planeswalker. Is 3 a white and a blue.
Standard. Best planeswalker in standard.
I still think he's the best planeswalker, period.
In standard.
But he's played modern.
I like him.
Anyway.
Both commander and standard.
But
I don't know about best planeswalker ever.
He comes in with 4 loyalty. He +1s to draw a card and then untaps 2 of your lands on your end step. His -3 puts target non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3rd from the top, which lets us mill it off the top. And then his -8 is you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls. The main reason he's in the deck is for the +1 and the -3. So being able to keep our hands full and untap for like counter magic or interaction of some kind is more important to us than hitting the ult, because we're trying to just empty our opponent's library. And our next 3 of is Teferi Time Raveler, because we don't want our opponents countering our spells. He's 3 mana for 4 loyalty, and each opponent says as his passive, each opponent can cast spells only any time they could cast a sorcery. His +1 lets us cast instants or any sorcery spells as though they had flash until our next turn. And then his -3 says you return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand and draw a card. So he kind of does what Hero of Dominaria does. He's just a little lower on the curve, and he gives us way less value over the long term of the game. Next, we are talking about interaction. We're playing control, so we have lots. Note that most of these spells are blue in order to trigger deep Drowned Secrets, but we are making some exceptions for removal pieces that we just kind of need to have. Our first interaction piece is Thought Collapse, which is a 3-mana counter spell. It's a cancel that says when you counter a spell, its controller puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. So if they have no way of interacting with their graveyard, it can be like a 4-for-1, which feels really good. Next, we have Warrant Warden. The first half of Warrant puts target attacking creature or blocking creature on top of its owner's library, which lets us mill it off the top. And then Warden gives us a 4/4 white and blue Vigilant Flyer, which, I mean, if we're on the back foot or we need another option to attack our opponent's life total, maybe, we can do that, or Planeswalkers. We are running 1 of Settle the Wreckage, because sometimes it just hits
Feels
everything.
good.
It feels so good to just hit like a mono red deck or a zombies deck or a mono black deck and just get rid of everything. It just exiles all attacking creatures target player controls, and that player may search his or her library for that many basic land cards. Put those cards into the battlefield tapped and then shuffle their library.
Feels
this
bad.
also has a secondary effect of reducing the size of our opponent's deck, which makes our mill plan even faster.
Feels bad.
We are running 3 of Ixalan's Binding. I thought about Prison Realm, but I figured Ixalan's Binding was better because it hit everything that wasn't a land and then just denied all copies of that card until further notice. And then we're running a full playset of Time Wipes, which is a blue board wipe. So we can, if we have a creature we want to bounce, which we are running 2, we can bounce that creature and then replay it, which will mill 2 more cards. And then it destroys all creatures. It's just 5 mana. I don't like those things. Go away.
Okay.
And then just exile them with Ashiok.
I like that. That's pretty cool.
Finally, we have Plan N, or just Nezahal.
If plans A through M failed, we do have Plan M.
Yes. Nezahal is a 7 mana 7/7 that can't be countered. He gives you no maximum hand size, and whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card. There are lots of those being played everywhere right now. He also lets you discard 3 cards to exile Nezahal and return it to the battlefield tapped under his owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So he's just this really big threat that's hard to deal with, and draws you cards.
Yeah.
And he happens to be blue.
He seems pretty good. Like, pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He hangs out and swings in for a bunch. Next we're talking about just mana, its colors. We are leaning blue, so we're not playing as many white sources. But it's a 2 mana deck, so we're running the, I guess, required 8 lands that give us one or the other without actually coming into play tapped.
Pretty much.
Hallowed Fountain and Glacial Fortress. And then we're running 8 islands and 4 plains. And then we have 4 cards that aren't really there to give us mana, but kind of letting us pivot a little bit. Karn's Bastion, because we're running a card like Ashiok, and Teferi, lets us proliferate our planeswalkers.
Spicy.
It also lets us proliferate Blast Zone, which we're playing. Blast Zone allows us to pay double X and tap to put X charge counters on it, and then we pay 3 and tap it and destroy each null and permanent with confirmed mana cost equal to the number of counters on it. So if there are a whole bunch, if we're against mid-range and they're running a whole bunch of 3-drops, we just blow up all their 3-drops.
Seems good.
Gives us another 2 sweepers to add to our 5 sweepers.
Seems good.
And then Karn's Bastion lets us keep Ashiok on the board longer, which allows us to mill more cards.
Yeah.
So this deck's a lot of fun. I haven't been playing it laddering because I'm kind of been tinkering around with it, but every time I do play it, I end the game with kind of a huge smile on my face. So
What about the sideboard?
Yep, we gotta move on to the sideboard.
In case
of emergencies. So in case our plan doesn't work, we are running a couple things that can kind of edit our plan. The first is Ugin. We are running control, and blue-white unfortunately doesn't have a whole bunch of straight-up removal. It's a lot of just stalling until we can win.
Because you're not supposed to let things on the board in the first place in blue and white. You're just supposed to say no.
Unfortunately, Teferi Time Raveler is in the format, which makes it a lot harder.
You're just supposed to say no.
And then when we say no, we sing the counterspell song.
Yeah.
No, 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 your boat gently down the no.
But Ugin, as we went over, is a 6-mana planeswalker that gives us bodies, draws us cards, and then he can destroy permanents. Which, I mean, if there are any permanents that we're having problems dealing with, like white tends to have issues dealing with planeswalkers, he does that for us. Narset is for against control decks. We don't want our opponent drawing more cards than us.
Narset's so good!
And she acts as kind of a pseudo search for Azcanta by letting us look at the top 4 cards and then get a non-creature, non-land card and put it into our hand.
She's so good.
Dovin's Veto is the only 4 we're running on our side, and it's because it's kind of a negate on steroids. It's a negate that can't be countered, and we just happen to be in the colors that can play it.
Fun police.
Baffling End is specifically for aggro, because Ixalan's Binding is just a little too slow. we're going to bring that in and exile their creatures which cost about 3 or less, which is basically everything that aggro wants to play. And then if they're able to remove the enchantment, they get a 3/3 beast or a 3/3 dinosaur instead of the creature we exiled.
Which is usually the lesser of two evils.
Yes. And then our last sideboard option is Absorb, which is intended for burn. And sometimes aristocrats if they're really aggressive. It's 2 blue and 1, counter target spell, gain 3 life. It feels
2 blue and 1 white.
2 blue and 1 white, I apologize. And it's really funny to counter lightning strikes and wizard's lightnings with this because it's like you gain 6 life instead of 3. It feels really good.
Well, you don't gain 6 life, you gain the 3 life.
It feels like gaining 6 life.
You just don't lose the 3 life that they were intending to make you lose.
It feels like gaining 6 life.
It's stupid.
So that is blue-white.
How dare you counter my burn.
That is blue-white mill. It's more of just a straight-up control deck that has an alternate game plan that puts pressure on the other player without just dirtling around.
Okay, I'm biased because 1, I love Azorius. 2, I love Control. But I have to say, I like this deck.
Well, that answers my next question. I was about to ask.
What?
So, James, since you don't play Standard, do any of these decks look interesting to you?
I'll be honest with you, if I was gonna get into Standard again, from scratch, the Zombies deck, believe it or not, is probably where I'd go.
Really?
But that being said, there are answers to that deck in the last 2 decks we covered, which makes if I had the money,
yeah.
I would I like them all, but I like them all for different reasons. So Mono Black Zombies is the most cost effective deck, which I appreciate.
Easily, yeah.
And it's very straightforward, and it's fast, and it uses lots of low power creatures, which I like. If you guys don't know how I play, almost all my decks are very low mana curve. Like, I just made my first big creatures fast deck ever, and everybody's like, who are you and what have you done with James? So Kenny's Merfolk deck I played against many times, and it terrifies me because I don't think I can pilot it.
There's some decisions, but it's not that hard.
It's not that hard, but it's like way too much thinking for me. Timer mid-range, I thought that deck was very good, but I think it's a great deck. It's just not a deck I'd normally play.
Right.
So it's not. I'm not really a mid-range.
It's very much a mid-range deck, yeah.
And it's pretty much the definition of a mid-range deck.
I'm getting into mid-range now. Like, I'm making some mid-range commander decks now, I guess. But ironically, I either play the really, really aggressive decks or the really patient decks. I don't ever do anything in between. It's that Gemini duality, I guess. Like, nothing in the middle ever, So I gotta say, if I was gonna buy the deck right now and I had to buy one of these 4, I would probably go with the control deck. Just because. But
it's a control deck with a clock.
A close second is Haley's Mono Black Zombies, I would say. So yeah, I would recommend both those two if you put me on the spot, because I like control a lot. I like too much.
I have to say, I really don't mind this Azorius mill deck, just because it's not like the traditional type of control. Like, it still has a lot of control elements, but it's different.
I enjoy control. I just don't like dirtling. It feels.
Yeah,
I don't like dirtling forever.
This feels like you're accomplishing something.
Yeah, it feels like you're pushing towards something rather than just stalling the game.
Rather than just like, let me do things and do things.
Which control decks
that might eventually let me do something.
A lot of control decks that I've seen suffer from that a lot, and I don't like playing control with no purpose other than just stall.
I really dislike the first 5 turns because it feels like you're playing desperation magic.
Right.
Yeah.
But this puts pressure on your opponent, because then they have to deal with things that you're playing.
And what I like about the Mono Black Zombies a lot is the lords and everything build up on each other. I really like those amalgamating decks that start an engine and each piece builds up off the next piece as you play.
Yeah.
That's very much my style. So I'd give it tie And I know you guys are trying to win because
pick one, damn it. No,
but black's my favorite color both in life and in Magic. So I'm a Zen master. A lot of people don't know that, but but you know, I have to say those are my two favorites. Like, there's nothing wrong with the Merfolk deck. It's just I couldn't personally pilot it, and there's nothing wrong with the mid-range. It's just like an alien territory for me.
That's fair.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, everybody's got
I think
their own
I think they're all good, but I'd rank them in that order. Like, I'd do 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, you know, that's how I do it. So that's my 10 cents. And I'm sure everybody in the chat disagrees with me. But
hey guys, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to comment on the decks. It actually
Yes, we actually will be posting deck lists for this in the
comment section?
Not the comment section. The description. That's the word I was looking for. I can not do anything right today, apparently.
Condiment section, and I'm like, what are we making?
Yes, the condiment section.
What?
We'll be putting these deck lists in the description. Stop it, Kenny. You were gonna mess me up again. You're trying to make me look bad. First you messed up my numbers on the slides.
I didn't do any of that.
First you messed up my numbers on the slides. We will be putting these deck lists in the description box of our YouTube video, as well as posting them on our various social media sites, so you can check them out if you want to. And they will have correct numbers on them, unlike people who don't proofread their stuff before they turn it in. It got me through high school. I don't know why it didn't work this time.
All right. Well, I think that's our show for tonight. Thanks for listening and watching. We are working on changing our format for the Podbean and moving to a better service because Podbean wants to charge us money.
And we're poor.
To have more space. So if you are listening like through the audio only podcast and wonder what happened, we're trying to figure something out.
And we will keep you updated on that as we figure it out ourselves.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And you can see us here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can tweet us at @ToCombat. We're here at Twitch TV/MoveToCombat. You can email us at movetocombatpodcast@gmail.com. If you liked our intro and outro music, you can check it out at soundcloud.com/James Shibe. That's James SHAIEB. That's me. It features local rapper Ron Bilas. And what? You laugh at that every time.
I do, because it's funny.
And
we're simple people,
if
James.
you like role-playing games, we have a sister podcast called Brave Yet Stupid that airs on Saturdays at Twitch TV/Brave Yet Stupid. We're wrapping up our Aberrant superhero role-playing game to its epic conclusion probably within 2 to 3 sessions from now, and then we're going to start Exalted. So if you're interested in role-playing games, check that out. Anything you guys want to add?
Let us know what decks you guys are playing in Standard right now, or if you like the decks that we built, and if you've played them at all. That'd be super cool.
Yeah. We want to hear your opinions.
Have a nice night, guys.
Yeah, have a good night, everybody.